Hold on to your goggles. It's time for the epic engagement adventure. Looks like I stuttered when I said, hold on to your goggles. Hey, everybody, welcome. So glad to have you here today. I have an expert in the art, the science of negotiation, communication, something that we take for granted that we are doing all the time. We think we're doing it, but are we really doing it? Are we really making a connection with that other person? Are we turning them off completely by what we say? Today, I've invited a master to come and teach us, Christine McKay. Christine, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, RJ. I really appreciate it. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited that you are here because we've got a lot to talk about. You've got a lot going on. Would you begin by telling the people who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So, Christine McKay, I'm the CEO of Venn, Venn Negotiation. I always spell it because half of the people like math and remember Venn diagrams and the other half don't. And so I've been doing negotiation for 30 years almost and have done a lot of work with large companies. I've negotiated with 68 of the Fortune 100 and almost half of the Fortune 500 across 55 countries, but I realized that there is a huge disparity in what small and mid-sized companies do with respect to negotiation relative to what larger organizations do. And so I launched Venn Negotiation out of a passion for helping smaller businesses level the playing field in their negotiation, learning how to ask for what you really want, getting clear on what that is, and providing tools and resources to do that through either training programs that we offer or consulting services where we help clients by leading them through a negotiation process.
That right there. I mean, it's so needed. You know, people call them so-called soft skills. That ain't a soft skill at all. What led you to want to do this for people?
Well, it started, I learned how to ask for things in a really bizarre way. I was an unwed teen mom, homeless, living out of the back of my car, and had three kids at 22, was on welfare. And after deciding to leave my first husband, I needed help and I had to learn how to ask for help in order to get what I wanted. Otherwise, I would have, when I went to the first time I went to a welfare office and they said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I wanted to go to Harvard," and everybody laughed at me. And, that's a pretty lofty goal to have when you just quit living out of the back of a car. And 11 years later, my three kids walked across stage in front of me and got little teddy bears, and I got my MBA from Harvard University. So the thing is that in order to make, we often stop ourselves when we think about needs. We go, okay, I need this. Right. I need this. And need is a survival thing. We need this to survive. But we don't give ourselves permission to explore more thoroughly what it is we want out of our lives. And in order to get the things that we want out of our lives, we need to be able to ask. And I just had a great conversation the other day with somebody in a networking group, and he was fascinated. I've gone to Burning Man 8 times. I'm a huge Burning Man person. And this year was a particularly great year, but he was very curious about it. And he said, "I don't understand why giving economies don't exist more broadly in cultures." And my response was, because we're not taught how to receive. We're taught that giving is an act of power and receiving is an act of weakness. And that is the dichotomy that we've set up. And that plays out in negotiation all the time. That if I have to ask for something, we see it a lot in David and Goliath negotiations where a big company, it's like, oh my gosh, I have an opportunity to do business with, with Microsoft, right? Or Apple, or take your pick of big organization. And the smaller organization is like, oh, may I have another, please? Right? Whatever, big company is going to give me, I'll take whatever they throw my way, without actually stopping and saying, okay, well, that dollar of revenue is costing me $1.20 to get,
Yeah.
and it's costing me employees, and it's, whatever it is. Do they understand? Do people understand that equation? And generally what we find is the answer is no. People don't understand that equation. And so they think in terms of needs. They think, and which is a short-term thing to think about. It's what we need is now and immediate. What we want is future. And so we have to start blending those two to be more effective in our negotiation.
Well, and I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated by that part that you said where people just don't even really know what they want.
Mm.
How do you start? How do you start walking people through the process of figuring out that question?
Well, the big thing is, I mean, I always talk about the number one requirement for being an effective negotiator is unending curiosity. It is always a question leads to another question, which leads to another question. So when I think about, I often have people ask me about a job, right? Because it's an easy example. Um, I want more salary. Well, what do you want to use it for? Right? How you answer that question drives a whole lot of things. I went into a car dealership once, and I uh, offered to buy two brand new cars, but I only wanted to pay for one. And I was like, I'll pay for one of them, and you can give me the second one for free. Right. And I and when I speak and I teach negotiations, I ask people, using the car as an example, what's important to you when you buy a car? What do you care about? What are the things that you assign value to? And people, make and model, gas mileage, safety, how fast it goes, all sorts of things. But do you want it today, or are you willing to wait for it? Because if you want to drive it off the lot today, that drives a negotiation model. If you're willing to put an order in and wait 3 years for it, that drives a very different negotiation model. And so when we talk about knowing what you want, it's getting down to a level of clarity in detail about what's possible and what's important to you, because you want to be able to look at all the possibilities, or as many of them as you can think of, and say, which of these things are my priorities and which ones don't I care about? Because the ones you don't care about, those things could be important to your counterpart, right? You want to know what they are. You want to know that they're not important to you, and you want to be able to give those away in the negotiation process, especially if they're important to your counterpart. But so often when I ask people, what do you want? They talk in very high level generalities. And the problem with generalities is you cannot take action on something general. You can only take action on something specific. And negotiation is all about getting clarity and specificity so that you can take action together to create a better future.
Interesting. I really love that. I mean, because so many times, when I back in the day when I was a corporate person, getting the job was everything, right? Getting the job was everything. I worked so hard in school for that. I still owe student loans. You know what I mean? Like blood, sweat, tears went into that. And then it comes time to negotiate, and I had nothing. I had a degree and a 4.0. That's what I had. Um, those actually don't matter very much. Not as much as you think that they would. Um, do you find, in your work that women have a harder time, or is it about equal? Is it about the same for everybody?
As negotiators.
Yeah.
So women statistically are more effective negotiators than men typically. The difference is
Interesting.
that we confuse haggling with negotiating. So when it comes to haggling, so let's just stick with a car. I'll ask people who loves to negotiate, and certain population of people, like, their hands get raised super fast. Well, they're not likely to love negotiating. What they really like doing is winning, and they think about negotiation in a win-lose environment, and they're usually negotiating very narrowly. So there's a binary outcome in their minds about what they're negotiating, or what they're haggling over. Negotiation is more complex. Negotiation is about having longer term relationships, building value over a longer period of time. The way that I define it is negotiation is a conversation about a relationship, and you cannot win a relationship, right? And you know, I hear all the time, I ask people this a lot when I'm speaking. It's like, who believes in having a customer for a lifetime, right? And pretty much every hand in the room goes up. And then I say, who in your sales process talks about how you're going to renegotiate the deal in the future? Zero hands go up. And my response is, then you do not believe in having a customer for a lifetime, because the deal that I signed today is going to change. And business changes, the environment changes, all sorts of things change. And if I care about having you as a customer for a lifetime, or you care about having me as a customer for a lifetime, then automatically we know that things change and our relationship is going to change. And what's working for us today may not work for us in 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, or 15 years, right? I know somebody who signed a new lease on a restaurant space on March 10th of 2020. And it was a 10-year lease, and they had no out. They ended up
Oh.
going out of business, and their investors lost their shirt. They had to file for bankruptcy, and now they're working jobs for somebody else, right? Because they didn't pay attention to what was the environment that was going on around them, and they weren't curious enough to actually explore that, right? And so, but women are good at thinking. Are We tend to think more, according to the research, we tend to think more holistically and less structure, less checklist, less like a checklist. So a lot of people will negotiate like it's, a shopping list. I want this color car with these kind of tires, with this kind of mileage, and whatever. It's the shopping list of things, versus looking at the whole of a problem and looking for ways to kind of assign things. And my easiest way of describing that, if I may, is a
Yes.
simple analogy. So I know this is weird, but I always have at my desk an egg. And when I ask people, right, an egg is one of the most commonly used foods in the entire world. And I tell people, I've got 3 people who want this one egg. How do we get 3 people this one egg? And most people immediately throw out things like, I'm going to boil it and divide it. I'm going to scramble it. That's kind of generally where people's minds go. But the first thing is, you have to ask a question. What do you want to use the egg for? Right? So what does each of the 3 individuals want to use the egg for? Well, one wants to make mayonnaise. One wants to make an egg white omelet. And one wants to make a very decorative piece of art, and they need to have the shell fully intact. You can't crack the shell, right? So you have somebody who needs the yolk, somebody who needs the white, and somebody who needs the fully intact shell. So then the question is, how might we do that? How might we keep this shell largely intact and still have a yolk and a white separated, right? Well, you do it by poking a hole in the bottom and the top and blowing on it, and you get an egg white, an egg yolk, and you get an empty shell that you can then turn into a piece of decorative art, a Ukrainian Easter egg. And this is the highest value use of an egg,
Yeah.
of that. And that's negotiation, is how do I take something so common as an egg and figure out a way to create more value out of it? And, you know, and that's really what negotiation is. And 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 it's about how we ask questions, how we dig deeper, how we get more curious about what we want to do and how we want to do things, and creating an environment where we're not telling people, but we're showing people things, and we're asking for people to be collaborative. Now, are there always situations where that's going to work? Not necessarily. I might not want to have that if I was in a hostage negotiation situation. I might want to be more manipulative because I have a binary outcome in a hostage negotiation. But in business, we don't have binary outcomes very often. And we have alternatives. So how do we get curious about what the alternatives are and what are the other outcomes that could satisfy our wants and our needs?
Exactly. The binary outcome. The binary outcome is something that, you know, the mentality, of course, it's a win-lose situation, right?
Yeah.
Either we're going to win or we're going to lose today. And so many people are demonstrating that that's the way it is in business. And what you're saying is hardly ever, people. We can create a win-win most of the time if we're just curious enough to start asking questions. That's fascinating to me. I would go and listen to your TED talk on this any day. Just so you know. Uh, well, beautiful. Well, I do wanna make available to everybody, um, how to get a hold of Christine. Uh, do you wanna talk about the book in the background as well? You wanna tell us a little
Sure.
bit about that?
Sure. I mean, the thing is that a lot of times, I often say that the hardest part of every negotiation is actually asking for what we want, right? Because we get all this noise in our heads that tells us, oh my God, if I ask for more money, that customer's going to go away, or that investor's going to not give me anything. Or if I tell a supplier I need it faster, they're going to do something bad with the product. Whatever it is, we come up with all sorts of ridiculous, insane stories in between the 6 inches of in between our ears. And so the book is really about why not ask, right? The boogeyman is not going to get us if we simply ask for what we want, right? And no is an invitation to ask another question, except in sex when no means no. But no is an invitation to ask another question, right? I often talk about how 7-year-olds are some of the most gifted negotiators on the planet because they're fearless about asking for what they want. And when they don't get it the way that they're asking it, they'll figure out a different way of asking for the same thing, or they'll go ask somebody else, right? And as adults, we quit doing that because we learned that there were consequences to that. And so then we convince ourselves that people are going to say no before we've even asked the question. So like buying 2 cars for the price of one. If I had told anyone that I was going to go to a dealership and try to buy 2 cars and get one for free, people would have said, you're out of your mind. There's no way you can do that. I shared this story just a couple months ago with a car dealership owner in the audience, and he came up to me afterward and said, oh yeah, that's totally doable, right? It's like, but we think that it's not, because we have some story that's told us we've not. So the book really goes through the process of negotiation, how I have used my story, what I've learned on my road from homeless to Harvard and beyond, to learn about negotiation, to really help the smaller mid-sized companies level the playing field and get more of what they want, because you all deserve it.
Yeah. Well, and the end all be all, for some people it's money. For me it's not. My North Star is not a dollar sign. I've got other stuff that I want to do. So in these negotiations, can I learn to figure out what's really important for me? And when I'm dealing with, some of my clients, help me get what I want, help them get what they want. I mean, it opens up so many things, and the starting stone to all of that is curiosity, it sounds like.
Absolutely. You have to be curious about yourself. You have to be curious about your counterpart, and you have to be curious about the situation in which you're negotiating. So we always talk about how you have to be curious about you, them, and it.
Yeah. Very good. Now I do want to ask, because this is the epic engagement adventure. For all of my coaches who are out there listening, what is a really great experience with engagement, engaging your audience? How have you done that in the past? What would you have to say about that?
So I'm kind of old fashioned. So I'm a country girl. I was born and raised in north central Montana on a farm in a farming and ranching community. And one of my favorite things to do still to this day is to send people handwritten cards, and included in them, because I love flowers, I love gardening, I often put a package of forget-me-not seeds in
Nice.
that. And the stories that I get back from people on what, oh my gosh, I planted these with my grandchild, or my wife loves these, and that's just, so I like to do things like that. And I have somebody on my team lives in Guatemala, and um she's here in Los Angeles, and she brought me a bunch of little worry dolls, right? That you essentially, in Guatemalan tradition, you speak to the worry doll and you put it on your bed, and it carries your worries away while you dream, while you sleep. And so that's something that I'm going to start to do. So I like to do things like that are representative of me, that are something that I care about, that's something that's important to me in my life. And I find that is the most effective way of engaging, because I'm trying to engage not for volume, I'm trying to engage for building a deeper relationship.
Absolutely. Engaging for volume, that's really important to some folks. For me, it's finding out. It really helps me, like, really red flag, paint it red. These are my people.
Mm-hmm.
The people that
Absolutely.
respond back and go, "This was awesome." And that helps my business grow more than anything, because every time someone is added to that group, I think about those characteristics. I think about that stuff that they have in common with the others, and I think, how could I reach more? How can I reach more of these? And the other thing that I really love about your response about the seeds and the forget me nots is it's a pattern interrupt.
It
Not too
is.
many people send in seeds.
No, exactly. It is, and that's also very negotiation. It's very much the notion of a pattern interrupt is huge in negotiation, and so it's consistent with who I am, and so I give things that are consistent with me. And it does what, it does. Pattern interrupt to move somebody away from a strong position in a negotiation is hugely valuable tool to use.
I could talk with you all day. unfortunately, our schedules simply will not allow. But I do want to say, I want to thank you for coming on. I mean, negotiation, it's one of those things we just don't really think about. But if using that simple tool really well, you can make your life so much better and so much more enjoyable. I can't wait till your big book comes out because I'm buying it. You know that I have to have the book. Any final words of wisdom, perhaps enough to string into a pearl string? I don't know. Any final things to share with my people?
I mean, the big thing to know is that negotiation is literally just a conversation. It's a conversation about what's going to work for you and what's going to work for your counterpart, and finding the intersection point of where that makes your life better, right? It's all about how do you create more value. Um, and it's just remember, negotiation is a conversation about a relationship, and you can't win relationships, but you can get more value out of it. Make your negotiations an egg.
Beautiful. I love that you use that analogy too, because forever I'm going to remember that egg story. I might not remember the particulars of everything, but I'm going to remember that egg story. I just want to thank you again for coming on. We will have you on again. Book you were saying is about January. You guys are going to start kind of pre getting the word out there.
So this one, Why Not Ask? A Conversation About Getting More, is available on Amazon now. We're going to be releasing the audiobook in January, so that book is available. Our second book, How You Ask Matters, will be coming out next year. So,
okay, beautiful, folks. Avail yourself of this knowledge. Do it. You will never ever regret it. I promise you. And that's it for today, my friends. Thank you, audience. You are absolutely wonderful and lovely. Please do reply in the comments if you've got comments or questions. And that's it for now. Bots of love.